Three, two, one. Alexis Sanders, welcome to this TechBounce conversation. You're a very well-known, famous name in the technical. Oh yeah, stop it! Don't
In
be
10
so
minutes,
humble.
keep going.
And then you wrote this book, and then you made that movie. And how did you feel? No, just kidding. But for everybody who is not familiar with you, can you please quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, you're going to have to read my book, which I haven't written yet. But no, my name's Alexis. I'm a senior account manager at Merkle. And I'm an often writer for Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal, Moz, and other industry publications.
You're so humble, but there's so much awesome, amazing stuff that you did and that you're doing. So one of them being the SEO Cyborg article on Moz.
Thank you.
Which I think really changed the way that I think about Google and technical audits in a nutshell. So I actually would love to start with asking you what your writing process looks like, how often you write, and why.
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely would not advocate my writing process to others because they tell you if you want to write a lot, you should write every day. You should have like a setup. And for me, I kind of just wait until some sort of inspiration strikes or try to just form an idea first of what is not being said or what is something that's useful. I had heard on a podcast once, someone mentioned, try to think about something that you didn't know last year that would have helped you so much this year. So I try to frame it in that context, either make it something that I don't see that's out in the industry or something that I think would be really useful to someone going through their SEO journey. And then after that, I guess for a lot of it, it's just a lot of editing and renditions. Like when I write, I try to just write everything out, grammar, spelling mistakes and all, and then go back and make sure that it's edited. I actually add leave like a separate week for adding images and creating them because I think a lot of times for people, it can be hard sometimes to connect with 2,000 words of blog post. So when you add images, it just breaks up that information and allows people to digest it a little bit better. So I really try to make sure that I set aside time for that type of thing. Other than that, yeah, just definitely trying to write as often as possible would be my advice, but I don't necessarily follow that. So, yeah.
But yeah, that's what I noticed with your pieces. They're very thought out. They're very thorough. And they have this big value added. That's important to me as well. Whenever I create content, whether it's a presentation or an article or even a conversation, I try to focus on the things that have not been said. I don't want to be that person that writes the 99th what is SEO type of article or why SEO is important to in your marketing type of stuff, right? Like the boring things.
Definitely. And like, I know that I do not have the energy to compete with Barry Schwartz on SEO updates. So I can't do that type of short content that's like going to be quick and new and fresh. Like my content's going to be probably more evergreen and longer and, you know, something that's a resource for someone in the long term, hopefully, or at least in a few years. But yeah, some of them take like the one on machine learning on Moz. I don't know if you've seen that one, but that took about a year to write and research. Yeah, I mean, it's 8,000 words, but it's poor Moz.
That is
over 8,000 words.
A small book, pretty much.
Thanks. Yeah, it's like I think a book is like 50,000 to 80,000 words is like a small one, so it's like a fifth of a book or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, but that took like a year. So most of them don't take that long. And usually the writing process is pretty, once I am ready to start writing, it goes usually fairly fast. I'll create like an outline and just start typing.
And then do you collect material along the way? Do you like read something or write down some thoughts in something like Evernote or Google Doc?
Usually I will basically have an outline in mind or some sort of like inspiration and just go for the writing from there. But yeah, I would definitely say like when I'm creating the outline, it's always about researching like what has been said out there, who can I reference in all this? Is there someone who is known for this and really good at it? And then I guess through that process, a lot of your ideas get eliminated. So there's a lot of stuff that's been said, a lot of stuff that, you know, you're never going to create something that's better. So why even try type of thing. But
yeah,
you know, it's good that it's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that, you shouldn't hold back all too much. If you have something great to say or new stance on like some of these evergreen topics, I think
Yep.
you should absolutely get it out. And I wonder where this comes from. Can you connect it back to something like your, I don't know, like your childhood or your teenage years where you started writing, or where you had that kind of
Getting deeper.
yeah, it's like actually a psychology session right here, so welcome. But no, I wonder, has this always been, your personality and always been something that you did, or is that something you recently developed?
That's a good question, because I definitely, growing up, didn't see myself as a writer. I was always more of the artist side of things, so like the graphic arts, which I think is where a lot of the visuals come into play, because I'm always trying to make things visually easy to digest. And in terms of writing, I guess when it really started for me, when I really started to feel more comfortable with writing, was when I did NaNoWriMo. I don't know if you've heard of it, but
No.
it stands for National November's Writers Month. And the goal is to write 50,000 words in a month. So that breaks down to about 1,667 words a day or something like that. And the whole goal of it is to prevent you from editing your work too much, because a lot of writers suffer from feeling like they're not good enough in writing.
Yeah.
I think probably everyone suffers from from that at some point. And if you don't, you probably should. At least a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit. So for me, the whole idea is to just like write and just keep writing, and every day. And if you miss like a day, the numbers just keep growing exponentially. So I think for me, I finished with about like 70,000 words one year. And after that, I just feel like I just became way more comfortable with writing. It became less of like a laborious type thing and more of like, get out your thoughts and then go back and edit. And going back and editing is so much easier, and so many people can do it too. I mean, like, I can, for instance, pass it to Max, who I work with, Max Prin. We can pass it to marketing, and they can kind of all give their feedback, and that in a way transforms the article too to be something that's better. But if you are constantly editing your work, it just becomes, you just get stuck in this perfectionist vortex of like never writing anything and just never feeling like you can write anything. So I think for me, that was probably when I started to become more comfortable with writing.
That pumps me up so much right now, because I love that idea. I certainly suffer from that syndrome that I never feel like what I put out is good. Yeah. And I love Max as well. Max, I got to give a shout out to Max at this point. He's one of the nicest people out there. Such a kind guy. It's ridiculous and so smart at the same time. But we're actually going to tie this all back to SEO, of course. So you mentioned that you were more on the visual side, and you really care about simplifying complex concepts. Yeah. So I wonder how that serves you in your technical SEO work, because I feel like there is a connection there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of blog posts were inspired by that in mind. So there was one about JavaScript and SEO, which I thought was a little bit overcomplicated at the time, or at least to me felt like this is not something that is as complicated as it sounds. So that was the inspiration for that Moz blog. There's one on getting to understand schema.org, which basically the whole idea being that schema.org, when you go there, can be so intimidating, and the structure of it can be so mysterious, but in the end, the structure is so useful. And if you understand how to use it, they really designed the information architecture of that site very well. So getting to understand and making that knowledgeable accessible is something that I like, and I try to do.
Yeah, I feel that all the stuff that you do. I think you have a talent to simplify very complex things.
And then sometimes bringing in like the fun too. I think that's a big part of learning as well. And there was a book that I had, like, I don't want to say I completely read this book, because I don't think you can ever completely read it. It's called Wise Guide, Poignant Guide to Ruby. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not.
So it's a book about learning the coding language Ruby. And the guy who wrote it is just this weird man who just has the weirdest writing style. And he writes and he has all these asides, and there's all these like non sequitur stories in this book. And literally you could probably read it like 100 times and never understand half of the stories that he said. But he's just so weird and quirky that I love that. idea about learning, is that it doesn't have to be necessarily so formal and like a technical blog post every single time that you write. It can be fun and entertaining as well.
Yeah,
and like add your personality in.
Yeah, add your personality and make it exciting. I will link to the book in the show notes, of course. Okay. But a little anecdote that I wanted to tell is my experience. With math. So I had math in school and was not good at it. And then I kind of rediscovered math when I dug much deeper into SEO and then got fascinated with it. And I wouldn't say I'm good at math, but I'm certainly interested in math now.
Yeah.
And back in school, it was very much that approach you described, this textbook, like 1-2 step, and this is how it goes, and that's the only way. And if you don't get it, then you have a problem. And then I discovered that there are completely different approaches to learning math. One of them being, for example, that you look at the big theorems that people put out or came up with, and the problem that they're trying to solve. Yeah. And that can give you a completely new entry point to math, and that changed my whole perspective to it. But one thing that you do really well is, you said you bring the fun into it. So I love how you, created the technical SEO game. So can you please, for the audience, describe what that is and all the answers and solutions too, please?
Yeah, so I have 2 SEO games. The first one is called technicalseo.expert. And it's basically like an online scavenger hunt. It's based after, if you're familiar with OAP Ninja. And the idea is that you have to go through basically the HTML, approach the site as like a mobile site, do a bunch of different technical SEO things, really use the Google Developer Console, and basically navigate your way through this experience. So that entire, I guess, there's 3 rounds, 3 levels, I guess. Each of them have like about 10 to 18 challenges that result in, I guess, achieving a level until you get to the end. But when I designed that, I felt like it was a little bit exclusive unintentionally, that someone who probably was stuck at a certain stage for whatever reason would feel like they couldn't get help. And so to complement that game, I made another game called technicalseo.guru, which is basically like an SEO RPG game where you have a bunch of questions and you basically go around the game and collect treasure chests by answering SEO trivia questions. And really the idea is that it's like no consequence learning. So if you didn't know something, you can just learn it, which is really cool to me and exciting because, it's just like you could take those questions and just do like a quiz with them, or you just, go around the world and, have fun with it.
I love it. I think everybody would agree to that. I want to peek behind the scenes. How did you come up with that idea? How did you design it? Like, what was the process? How did you implement it?
Yeah, I think so. I started back in August of last year, like the really early August, and ended in about December. So it was like a 6-month project that I had on the back burner. So it took a long time, but I think that's just because there's a lot of stuff that happened in between, like, working and whatnot. But yeah, a lot of it, I started off with kind of like, there's a tool called RPG Maker, which allows you to streamline and organize all of your RPG making game. And a lot of it doesn't necessarily require that you know any code, but it does help if you run into any issues with it. And a lot of the time I spent on the inventory, actually. So there's probably about 50 items that you can get in game. There's like armor, there's weapons, there's characters, classes, everything. I mean, it just gave me such a new level of respect for game designers and like the level of planning that should go into a game. Because it just takes forever to create all of that stuff. And then I didn't do any custom designs for that. Well, I did a few like minor changes here and there. But like just designing a game would be crazy, like from scratch, because there's so many things you have to add into design.
Yeah, I love game
not
design.
A lot of writing went into it, so you'll probably be able to tell that as you play the game. It's definitely meant to be more of like, just like it keeps you moving, you keep traveling. Maybe some things are a little broken. You just kind of ignore it. Hopefully.
No, I love game design. In fact, games were my entry point to SEO. And yes. I mean,
tell us more.
Tell us more. I played a ton of video games as a kid. Mm-hmm. I remember the day that my father brought home 2 Game Boys for my brother and me. And I was, oh God, how old was I at the time? I would assume somewhere around 10 years old, maybe a bit younger, And that was it. That was the end. I got so hooked. I had like a Sega Mega Drive and Super Nintendo, and then computer games started. And then I really took it to another level when you had broadband internet, and you could play online with everybody around the world, and they played Counter-Strike and StarCraft and Diablo, and like you have, oh my God,
endless games,
endless games all the time, and I was, I was so soaked in. And then the bridge to SEO was when we needed a website for our gaming clan to apply for tournaments, and then I was the guy to figure out how to make a website, then wondered how people come to the website, so it kind of spun up from there. But I for a long time actually wanted to go into game development, and I would not rule out that in the future at some point I'm somehow involved, because I love it. It has everything that I love, right? It has the technicalities and code and data, but it also has the storytelling, the creative side, visuals. And I have a strong feeling you're a gamer too.
I would call myself like a semi-gamer. Like right now, I'm really into the Ring Fit Adventure. I don't know if you've played that.
No.
But it's so fun. It's basically a Switch game that you exercise and you do fitness battles. And like, it's meant for children. Like the game is designed for children, but for all ages. It's a Nintendo game. It's for all ages.
Gotcha.
But it's really fun. Let's go through, some of it's pretty tough. I mean, it wouldn't be tough for someone like you who's like a fitness person, but for like us non-super fitnessy people, it's like 200 squats is like a huge deal.
Yeah, of course.
Like start sweating at the end.
Yeah, well, you should. I sweat after 200 squats, but it's a nice way to make it, such things a bit more fun and exciting. And I feel like there's some sort of a theme where, you just take complex and challenging thing and you make them simple and fun and exciting. Yeah,
and the guided tutorials too. I mean, honestly, gaming's like a great example of excellent content, which is something that SEOs obviously like we care a lot about.
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to think about. Their industry too, like really does have a lot of, is like a huge driver of innovation. There's just so much money in gaming that, it's cool to see how, if you look at like the rendering engines for certain games over the course of many years, like how much better and how much realistic they get, and how they're just pushing the cutting edge of being able to visual graphics. It's really cool.
Oh, it is absolutely stunning, and I totally agree with you. So many people say that the adult industry is where all the modern media formats have come from, but I feel like gaming is a much stronger driver. And I've been playing League of Legends a couple of years ago much more intensely, and now I installed it like once a quarter or every 6 months, and then I deinstall it right away because I know I'm not gonna be able to stop playing. But man, they have seasons now, and they have these large World Cups, which I think have more more watchers than many classic sports events. Yeah. And the show that they put up is stunning. They have holograms on stage. I mean, Jesus, I'll link to a trailer in the show notes, but my brother showed this to me recently, and I could not believe it. No, definitely. It's crazy. It's awesome, though. It is absolutely something to strive for. Yeah, seriously. Oh man, the gaming community is so strong. Yeah. Anyway, so you mentioned that you use RPG, or you did use RPG Maker to develop that game, and then what does the process look like? Do you just come up with like 50 quests and then you write them down and then you try to translate them into a game? So for me, like I said, first was about creating the inventory and then laying out the maps, connecting all the maps together, which actually took a really long time because you have to connect every entry and exit point from one map to another. So like anytime anyone enters a building, every time you go off the map, you have to connect all of those together. And if you have a fairly large sized world, you want to make sure that everything's connected in a way that's like the game flows in a nice direction. Creating all the enemy characters, the dialogue, making sure the functionality works for everything. So when someone opens a treasure chest, that they can't just continually open it. There's a few like that in the game that you can continually open. I didn't go back and fix all of those because, like, who doesn't love infinite money? But
that kind of stuff as well. And then going back and then making sure you're editing, game playing. I think it took me speed running probably about 2 hours to play the game, knowing what I was supposed to do, and kind of skipping everything. So, but I guess maybe some faster gamers could probably navigate through that a little bit faster than I could.
Nice, that's very impressive. But as the SEO community thanks you for that game, I think it's fantastic,
thanks.
and it's such a great contribution. I mean, just there's no, I don't see any incentive for why, like there's no kind of like pop up in the middle of the game to get email subscribers or something. I feel like you just did it for the community.
Yeah, there's really nothing there that would give any data back to Merkle or anything like that. It's just like kind of like a cool side project that we thought was fun.
That.
Yeah. It's good too. I mean, Merkle does pay for the website, so,
What's the? I'm
download
curious.
one of our PDFs or something. Give
Yeah,
the marketing team a bone.
But I see so many great projects coming out of Merkle without that feel like just giving back. Like even the technical SEO tools that you got up, all like what's the? Please explain the philosophy behind that to me.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think for me, it's usually whatever I do. Like my projects are usually like whatever I do in my free time. So the 2 games would be like my free time type stuff. And Merkle's just like, yeah, sure, we can host it. Like, why not? And then Max's stuff, Max usually does technical SEO as part of his like full-time job. I mean, it depends on like the level of work that he has because he supports almost all teams with any sort of like complex technical issues. But he also works on technicalseo.com and builds out tools. And some of those start off as ideas for the internal team. And some of those are like ideas for how can we help the community in general.
Yeah, amazing. I just love what you're all doing. Great, fantastic team. And so I'm also curious about, let's switch back to a bit more technical SEO. I wonder what your kind of routine looks like. I mean, when it comes to your day-to-day, like what do you work on and how do you approach client projects?
Yeah, definitely. So as an account manager right now, I have 3 accounts. And every day really looks completely different depending on what the account requires at that specific time and what the client is requesting first, and then what we think is important. So usually we'll build out our 2020 strategies in sometime like late November, December. So that may be later than other people, but that's usually when we build those out and then present them in early January. And basically those are our ideas for the entire year. Based on those, we'll take those big ideas and high level, action item strategy type things, and then bucket them into different action items that we want to achieve throughout the year. So we'll build out like a giant, basically Gantt chart of things that we need to accomplish. And some of those things are, very technical and mundane, and such as like trying to find out which pages have the most similarity and duplicate content. Some of them are way more strategic, like how do we increase appointments on the site and the functionality of that, which, depends on the client and their needs. So
that makes sense.
Do
you have No, that's fine. That's fine. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. So do you have a kind of 1-2 step process for, especially when you get a new client or when you look at a website, what are the technical SEO things that you first look at?
Yeah, definitely. So like we have standard operating procedures at Merkle on how to go through and audit a site, but I'm not really a rule follower. So I like to really start with like exploratory testing. So like basically going at the site, looking at it and trying to just find things that I think are wrong. So starting with the site itself, I'll usually start some sort of crawl. I'll use something like either OnCrawl or Screaming Frog just to start getting ideas on paper and making sure that before I make anything official, I just see what kind of the deal is. And then also, if we don't, let's say for instance, since this is a new client, we don't have like GSE or GA or something along those lines, their actual data, then I would go to a tool like SEMrush or Ahrefs and basically look at how they're performing compared to their competitors. If I'm lucky, they only work in a specific industry with very clear-cut competitors. If I'm not so lucky, then they have a lot of different competitors from a lot of different industries. So it's a lot more segmentation. But let's just pretend for the sake of things that, it's some industry where there's like a very clear-cut competitors. In that case, I just pull down all that data and sort it, compare it, see like who's the best, who's ranking most efficiently or I guess highest per category, and see what they're doing and like what does that ecosystem look like. I guess there's also a lot of advantageous, a lot of usefulness of just going to the SERP and kind of seeing what's going on. I mean, I think for a lot of industries, most people are familiar with, local industry. Their SERPs are going to look way different from like a SaaS company's SERP, but making sure that you understand what's going on in this organic search space as well as what's going on the site and where they're ranking overall. So that's probably how I would approach it. We also have like some general technical audits. So like stuff that was in the SEO Cyborg, where you can go down and just look at kind of checklist items just to make sure that, as you're going through and auditing, you're looking at very specific things. Because I think the disadvantage of exploratory testing is it's very informal. You're not really looking for anything specific. You're just kind of trying to get ideas. But as you move more towards the traditional side of things, I think the idea of almost like checkmark SEO becomes more useful. And then as you develop more with that client, then you can go more into the strategic side of like, okay, what types of like content hubs are we focusing on? How are we going to address these particular topics? How are we going to connect everything together?
This is fantastic. And it looks very much like my process as well. And I'm so glad that I very much mean it. And I'm so glad that you mentioned exploratory testing, because there was something that I was doing that I never really had a name to. And it's what you mentioned. It's like trying the site out. Look what it feels like. Look how it appears in the search results, for which there's not really... Like, I never had a name to this, and I'm glad that you mentioned
it comes from software quality assurance. So I had taken a class by a guy who actually is now working for the W3C, and he, in his course, that's what he calls it. It's like, I guess, the official name for it. So I was like, oh, I like that.
I love that. When you mentioned the class, seriously, I like, oh my gosh, finally. Yeah.
Dustin Eisler. Check him out.
Shout out. And while you mentioned that you're taking a class right now, can you tell the audience what exactly you're doing in terms of computer science school, and maybe also why you're going back to school?
Why? That is the question. No, so I decided about 2 years ago that I wanted to go back and get a CS degree, which I've been thinking about grad school, as obviously, but to do grad school, you have to have a lot of the requirements ahead of time. And that for me at first was kind of like a drawback. You have to kind of start over and do all these courses, and it can be a bit of a pain, and school is very expensive. But the one thing I really like about school is that it gives you a lot of focus. So I decided that I wanted to do a CS degree, which I'm excited about. So I've been doing it for about 2 years now. And it's like, in some ways it's like a challenge, but I think it's also more fun as an adult because, you don't have the pressure that the students have, whether they realize it or not. Like, so yeah, it's been such a great experience for me. Like, I love school. I love learning. And so it's been awesome because a lot of the things too are things that I would never go out and learn on my own. So.
No, I hear you. I have this same kind of pull. I love learning as well. And I thought about going to school myself. So I'm happy to talk to you and see what your experience is like. What is the worst and the best thing about it?
The worst. I think the worst is just like recognizing as an adult how ridiculous the college system is. I think it's just always like people in somewhat of authority positions that like aren't in authority positions trying to make decisions, which can be frustrating, or like, how expensive it is. Like, it's absurd. It's like $3,000 per class. It's insane. But so those would be the worst parts. I think the best parts are the focus that it gives you. So, you have to learn something within a particular time frame, and you have to learn it at a fairly complete level to pass the course, which is great because like most people, I mean, there are definitely people out there that will go out and learn Calc 2 and people that will go out and learn assembly and, theory of computation, and like we're learning now like the Church-Turing hypothesis or something like that, or rule. I guess it's a rule. But like there are people that will go out and learn that stuff. I'm just like, I feel like I'm a motivated person, but I feel like I just wouldn't do that on my own. So it adds like this nice kind of like side thing that I do.
It is so you mentioned the theory of computation. Is that your favorite class or your favorite subject at the moment?
That's just the one I'm in now. So it's just top of mind. So yeah, I'm in 2 classes now. One's actually on designing web applications, which has been super fun.
Nice.
And the other one is on theory of computation. So
can you summarize the theory of computation for us?
Yeah, so basically the entire goal of the class is to decide what can and what can you not use a computer to do, And then on top of that, how hard is it to do those things? Like how complex is it to do those things? So you start off with like these very simple machines, like you could almost like, I guess, finite state machines is what they're called. And you can think of them as like a sliding glass door, like as the simplest type of thing, where you have basically logic where it's like, okay, if someone is there, I open. If someone is not there, I close. If someone is there, I always stay open. Those type of things, and then it gets more complex from there.
And I wonder how you tie that back.
Hope I summarized that well. Hopefully my teacher won't watch this.
I guess I'm the worst person to judge that, so it makes sense to me.
You're like, sounds good.
I'll take it. And how does it benefit technical SEO or your work in SEO? Like, have you from that class or from studying computer science? And it doesn't have to, right? But I wonder, have you, besides exploratory testing, found anything that you were able to apply right away?
Yeah, definitely. And some things I think are more easily applicable, but I think the best part is like the underlying mentality that I think they're trying to teach the students is this idea that like you just have how to attack a problem and how to take what you know, take what you have, and then work from there to solve the problem, which I think is like very similar to what we deal with on like a daily basis with SEO, because there's always a new way of doing something or some different tool that does something different. So I realized, maybe not necessarily early on, but like as I've been doing more computer science classes and as I've become more seasoned in my career, that, sometimes I will stray away from things that I don't know, not intentionally, but as an example, one of my coworkers has a background in programming, John Kaizio, which is awesome. He's amazing. And he had sent me this R script and I just didn't touch it because I was like, I don't know how to deal with it. And that to me was like, why didn't I like go after that? Why didn't I just like download all this stuff that I needed? Like I could have figured it out myself. But like, I guess the whole idea is that as you're doing school, like you kind of learn, first of all, how to tackle some different types of problems, but then also that like you can. So it's like a mentality of being able to solve any problem. So I think a person who I am now, I would have been more proactive about solving that type of thing.
Interesting. And is there a specific process that you were taught in school that helps you to tackle complex problems?
I guess you could definitely break it down into a few different states. There's a presentation I have on like technical SEO problem solving, which I think kind of outlines that more clearly. I wish I had it in front of me now because I'll probably forget a step. The first step being like figuring out what the problem is actually asking of you. And I think that can happen a lot of times in like data analysis, that like you have this data, you have it segmented in a bunch of different ways, but you need to figure out like what question are you trying to answer? Like what is the insight? So that can help with that type of thing. So figuring out the problem that you're trying to solve, then establishing what do you have? What data are you given? I mean, this is very traditional with math, but like you're given everything but the thing you need to solve the problem, which like I guess doesn't always exactly fit in the real world. But the whole idea is to think like, okay, what do I have? But then also like, what do I not have? What can I get? What can I not get from the problem? There's a book on, I can't remember its title, but it's basically like how to be amazing at math or something. I'll send you the official link so people can find that. But the example that he uses is basically about how in World War II, the Americans had set up this camp of scientists where they would go in and perform statistical analyses and math and do all this crazy stuff to help the U.S. military. And they had this guy who was like a crazy genius who just like the way he was able to synthesize problems was just like out of this world. And so all the mathematicians like looked up to this guy. And he went through and they all went through this exercise. They had received all of these planes back, all these airplanes that had been shot, and basically had established like, okay, well, we have all these airplanes shot. Let's do some analyses on where they were shot to see where we can buff up the armor so we can be most efficient with our costs. And so all these statisticians went through and they said, okay, so we have all these numbers, all these places on the airplane, and we think because we have almost no bullet holes on the engines, that we should take all the armor off the engines and put them in other places. And this guy who was like this mathematical genius came in and he said, all right, and he like looked at all the data and he's like, well, what you guys aren't thinking about is not just the bullet holes. It's the fact that what about all the planes that didn't come back? So that idea of thinking about what's not there is also really important. And the reason in this particular case that they didn't have any planes that were reclaimed with bullet holes in the engine was because they blew up. So there were no remains. So that was actually a very important part of making sure those parts were armed. So just kind of like he gave that as an example of mathematical thinking and how in school that's what they're kind of trying to teach. But in the end, like unfortunately, partially because there's a lot of math that's been built up that we're kind of standing on the shoulders of giants like Isaac Newton, obviously. But part of that reason is that we have all these issues because we don't understand the history. Like we never have to fight that a negative number is real. So why would we question it, or think about it or process that information? Whereas back in the day, like that was a huge question. Like nobody knew how to deal with them. Like whole numbers and natural numbers were like where it was at. So not knowing what you don't have is also important. And then beyond that, trying to set up some sort of formal equation, something that you can solve from there, and then trying to actually solve the problem.
I love it. And the airplane example is my favorite example for biased samples in statistical testing. Yeah. That is so perfect that you allude to that, but also like your step-by-step process for solving complex problems. And it kind of reminds...
look at the deck. It covers everything. And it's in technical SEO terms too. So,
but I think it's so applicable to everything else as well, right? And that's what I like about SEO. We're dealing with lots of variables and lots of uncertainty, and we have a lot of complex problems. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see is that people don't spend enough time to correctly phrase the question that they're trying to solve, or correctly even phrase the problem. It's oftentimes... and by the way, I see this in management and in companies and work in general as well, But specifically in SEO, it's often like, fix this canonical because it's wrong. And that's a very specific use case. But then you come back to, why, is that page even important? And how does it play into the market strategy? And how does it play into the company strategy? Like, what's the whole purpose of it? And what's the actual problem? Is it that the canonical is wrong? Is it that there is a faulty logic in the system or in the backend that places wrong canonicals? Is it that somebody has access to the CMS and sets canonicals manually? They don't, I feel like the zooming in and out and thinking laterally and horizontally vertically is something that a lot of people don't do often enough, and would probably help a lot with solving complex SEO problems. So I very much feel that in your approach.
Definitely. And that is the cool thing about computer science too, is it's just all logic. So there's always some break in the logic. So like, I don't know, when you're programming, I think the common adage is that like, it's never the program's fault. It's always your fault. So you have to get used to, like, I guess, realizing that it's not a mistake, that things are the way they are.
Yeah.
You know, which I think is kind of cool.
It absolutely is. And I think something that's also connected to that is root cause analysis.
Yeah.
And the thing that I like the most, or the method, is the five whys. Like ask myself 5 times.
Yeah.
Oh, you love those? You have to, okay. So yeah, I feel like we just align completely on all of these topics. But just diving deeper
definitely.
and really going back.
That's such a good advice too to someone who's starting off too, because like if you can just continually go like those 5 whys deep, you'll eventually get there.
yeah, hopefully, and you can apply that to yourself, and then go absolutely mental because you start to question like, why you do things, and oh my god, why am I like that?
Yeah.
Why was I born?
Yeah, I think too, whenever, just I guess general advice for like people going through an existential crisis. My mom's like a more practical person than I am. I feel like I'm more of the type of person that's like, oh my God, like everything's like weird and life is, nihilism, whatever. But my mom always is the person that's been very grounding for me. And she always just says like, just be. Like sometimes it's okay to just live, It doesn't always have to be like, you have to find your purpose. Like you can do that as you go.
Yeah, such a big lesson.
I
it resonates a lot with me because recently in my position as more of a manager, I have read a lot of content about management and leadership, and I got I got hooked by this idea of conscious leadership, and I attended a leadership camp about 3 weeks ago in Denver, and this idea of just being. It sounds so hippie, but it's so profound and so important. And I have a feeling that a big part of my audience will resonate to that, because I feel like you and I, we're very driven people, we're very curious, and we're pushing all the time. And it quickly delves into blaming yourself for not being good enough, or criticizing yourself, right? You know what I mean, because we both feel the same thing. And then sometimes it's enough to just be and just do, and that really resonates with me. I
have this like quote. I wish I had it with me, but it's like in the back room, so I'm not going to go get it. But, but basically, one of the quotes one week was like, "Start with what needs to be done, then start with the possible, and then you'll be doing the impossible."
Huh.
It's like I was like, "Oh, it's nice."
That is really
but
good.
I do agree with it, because in some ways, like, you see someone like a Rand Fishkin, or someone who's like a very talented speaker, or just like a thought leader that comes up with these brilliant ideas, and you think like, wow, like they've done so much and they are just so accomplished. But at the end of the day, like getting to that point is just about doing things, like just doing small things, like writing an article, or sharing your thoughts, or being active on Twitter, or going to a conference and doing a speech that's like not as good as theirs, but and then eventually you end up with like a portfolio. So I don't know. It's kind of like just do what's possible. Don't stress about the impossible.
I very much agree, and I feel like too many people, including myself, at least until the last 1 or 2 years, get so hung up on what other people have done and how they've done it, and trying to copy that instead of using the principles, which are curiosity, hard work, humbleness, and then applying that to just whatever they do and how they do it, and they're just going their own path, right? Like with Rand Fishkin, everybody tries to be the next Rand Fishkin, and I thought about that as well for some time. But there's no other Rand Fishkin. Yeah, there's no other Rand Fishkin. There's no other Jay-Z. There's no other. Call any big name that comes to mind. There's only one, and so.
I would agree too that there's some pressure to do stuff like that. Like you think about, let's say you speak at the same conference as them, you're going to get speaker reviews, and yours are probably going to be way more average. Like not yours, but like mine definitely. And so you just kind of have to like reset expectations and say like, I'll never be good as Will Reynolds or as charismatic as him, but I don't have to be, like I can kind of approach it my way.
Oh yeah, great call out because Will Reynolds is a hell of a charismatic guy, very funny, entertaining, very cool so and smooth. I was
you see
thinking
it and you're like, you wonder who got the 5 on the speaker. Like, come on, like killing the bar for the rest of us.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there on stage with my German accent and speaking gibberish that nobody understands, super stiff, and you're like, oh my god, this is going to hell. No, but shout out to all the great people that also paved the way and that are doing such great things. And I think it's also amazing. Yeah, absolutely amazing. And I think it's also something that you can apply this problem solving process to, maybe, So if we're to think about like phrasing the problem correctly, so the basis is that a lot of people, maybe including myself, blame themselves for not being better or feeling guilty or inferior. I'm exaggerating right now, okay? So, but then
I'm exaggerating, but that is what's going on in my head,
Right. Let's be real and honest here.
Like, let's just suppose I were to think such a thing.
Yeah, of course. Let's pretend. But the actual question is like, what is the real problem here, right? Is the real problem that I'm not as charismatic, or is the real problem that I'm telling myself the story that I have to be as charismatic as Will Reynolds? And then you can also think about like, what can you actually solve? Like, what are actually strengths, or what are actually things that you can improve, right? Maybe it's clarity on your slides. Maybe it's speaking slower, which I'm working on right now. Or other stuff, right? Like I think that's the bigger problem. So the process that you outlined for technical SEO, I feel like you can apply to everything, including speaking.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think one of the other things too that I try to remind myself of when I go on stage is, I don't know. Sometimes I try to remind myself that every time you're getting better. And I guess I don't necessarily think every time you're getting better. I think it's more of like a gradual upward type thing. But you're learning more about yourself. You're learning more about your craft. And, sometimes you are going to not do as well as you usually do. I think a lot of people have felt that before, where they'll have really great presentations and then really ones that are, I guess, below their level of expectations for how they would do. And in those cases, you just got to like take that as learning, similar to what you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And to tie that back to SEO, I wonder how you keep yourself informed in terms of SEO. Like, how do you improve your technical SEO chops and skills, if that's even possible?
Oh, it's definitely possible. I think that to some extent going to school is part of that, and just learning more about how developers work. Obviously, we're doing a lot of client work. I think there's always ways to be more efficient and understand more from different accounts and different experiences. Like, you may be very familiar with one particular stack, but maybe if you go in a different stack or with a different, I guess, even like JavaScript framework or something, you're going to learn something different. So just working experience. Obviously, I learn a lot from the people around me. So at Merkle, we're really lucky to have like a team of like 70 people. So we can always draw on each other's experiences, which is really great. I learn a lot from people on Twitter, which is awesome because, like, I guess a lot of people, you wouldn't necessarily expect that you would learn a lot from other people on social media, but I think we have such an active and engaged community that we're able to learn a lot from each other, and I think we're willing to share, which is awesome, which probably goes back to almost like the legacy of like Rand Fishkin, learn a lot from conferences. Programming, I really like, there is a website called codewars.com, and you can break out, they have a bunch of different languages, but if you want to learn like Python or JavaScript by problem solving, you can basically go through and do little exercises on there, and they're levels from like very beginner to like building out and solving complex problems and algorithms and stuff like that. So that's a great resource as well. I learn a lot from LinkedIn Learning, from client websites. I have one client now that has an entire hands-on lab set where you can go in and do all the stuff with their software, which is really cool. It's like, that's me. Yeah, there's so much to learn. Khan Academy, you mentioned math. You must have come across Khan Academy then.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, oh, yeah. Like, I mean, Sal Khan, like, basically my math teacher. It's like he's the best tutor for any math student, for sure. I'm so jealous of students that have math these days because I feel like when we were in school, it was such a struggle to learn math. Like if you didn't get it, like you just didn't get it. But now it's like there's so many resources online that like if you're struggling with any concept in math or just math in general, like you can go back and like sit there and step by step, like from the beginning, learn everything. And I mean, it's just like surreal. Like we never had that.
Yeah.
It was like either you go through the textbook, which was like dry and old and not fun, or suffer. So I think there's always a lot of places to learn and perfect your craft. And maybe it's not necessarily like just industry publications, because I do think we have a lot of amazing industry publications, a lot of people that are sharing awesome content. Google shares a lot of stuff. They have a lot of great documentation. I know you wrote an article about learning technical SEO, where you got a lot of people's thoughts on learning technical SEO. So we have that as well.
Also your thoughts.
Also mine are in there. Yeah,
big piece of that article. I mean, I didn't really write it. I just like asked you and two other people, Paul Shapiro and who else did I ask? I forget the third person now. Paul
and Bartosz.
Oh, Bartosz. Gosh, how could I forget Bartosz? My apologies. But yes, that was a great article that started lots of different things.
There's one on SEER too. I mean, like you probably wouldn't need this, but like if you're recommending content to like a beginner, one of the, I believe, account managers at SEER, hopefully he's not like a director or something, I'm like lowering his title, wrote a great article about like 55 resources for someone in SEO. And so it's like you can go through that. I mean, there's so many resources out there to like learn and develop and perfect your craft. When I was like, I guess starting, like I think everyone at Merkle is fairly technical, but when I was like really starting to get deeper into the technical side, what I would do is go back and read Mike King's Technical SEO Renaissance blog. And just like I would just read through and like list out all the topics that he had covered that I just felt less comfortable with, like maybe it was page speed, and I would just go through and read all the Google documentation and stuff like that. So
absolutely. That was
so much to learn.
So much to learn.
Word vomit of like everything.
No, I want that. I want that, really. It's so helpful. This the show notes are going to be an inventory for.
It's going to be hype.
No, I think
that's where it's at.
No, seriously, it is. That's a great repository of so many resources to improve yourself, and I think that's a perfect way or a perfect point to kind of wrap this up, because I feel like we came full circle, which I love, and I want to thank you so much for all the great value you gave the audience and me. But before I wrap this up, Alexis, where can people follow and find you?
You can follow me on Twitter at Alexis K. Sanders.
And probably Googling your name will result in a million.
Yeah, you can do that. There's actually, though, this past week, there was someone convicted for a crime, so you may see something pop up for that.
Okay.
You have a Google alert on your name, right?
I have a what?
A Google alert on your name.
Oh, yeah, of
right?
course, yeah.
Oh, you have to do it. You get all the juice about other people in the world with your same name.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
That one's not me.
Sometimes bad.
So if there's any news, like, poor guy. He had a rough life. But
anyways, hey, thank you so much. And by the way, for
so
everybody listening and watching, I really appreciate a thumbs up and 5 stars on iTunes and SoundCloud and Spotify, wherever you're watching and listening. I would love to hear in the comments or on Twitter what you think. Like, what is your problem-solving approach? What are the resources that help you learn SEO? Tag us on Twitter, comment on YouTube, wherever. We're happy to delve in.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be so cool. Get to learn from all the listeners.
Thank you, Alexis. Have a nice day.
All right. Ciao.
Ciao.